Welcome to the Rewilded Human podcast, where Dr. Lucille and Lynn will tackle your most difficult and intimate questions with candor, tough love, and a little dash of humor. In today's episode,
it was like profound. And I think a lot of the time people self-sabotage in ways like that, and they're not even aware that they're doing it unless somebody speaks up. And that's another problem we have in our society.
You would see your mother doing something as an example, and then you kind of carry on that toxic pattern, and then you pass it on to your children as well. So there has to be a point where you kind of break this pattern.
You deserve to die. Some people have these thoughts.
And then you look for toxic relationships as well.
And you look for toxic relationships that simply mirror all those negative beliefs about yourself, mirror them back to you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 47 of the Rewilded Human podcast. I'm Lynn Hardy. I'm a naturopath and a nutritional consultant. And my co-host, Dr. Lucille, who's a holistic psychiatrist. And together we're bringing you this wealth of knowledge so we can help you grow spiritually, mentally, physically, everything. So this podcast has a very holistic approach for you guys. And in this episode, we're going to talk about self-sabotage and why we think it's selfish. And what kind of triggered this episode for us is the fact that, I'm sure you hear people saying this all the time. It's my life. I can do whatever I want. Okay, I'm drinking alcohol. I'm only hurting myself. What does it have to do with you? I'm eating like a pig, but it doesn't matter because it's only my life that I'm hurting. But what people don't realize is that when you're sabotaging your life and you're not exercising, you're not taking care of yourself, you're self-destructing, you're not just affecting your life, you're affecting the lives of everyone around you. So for example, if you're in a relationship, you're married, and your husband is not taking care of himself, and he can say, oh, it's my life, I can do whatever I want, and it's none of your business. But yeah, when you're in diapers 5 or 10 years down the line, it's going to be my business because then I need to sacrifice my life in order to take care of you. So I think self-sabotage is very selfish, and there are many reasons for that. But Dr. Lucille, I want to know what you think.
Do you know what? Every form of mental imbalance, to be perfectly honest, is selfish. It's selfish, especially as you've said, if you don't want to take responsibility for it and you're not doing something to correct whatever the imbalance is. But self-sabotage, I think everybody can relate to that. Not all of us are psychotic or have any other kind of, we don't have all panic disorders or other things, but we've all sabotaged ourselves at one time or another, right? And I think that the most important thing is that we be in a mindset of figure out what we did and just do it better, right? Mm-hmm. Yes. And you're right, because it doesn't just affect us, it has a ripple effect on everybody. So when you think about that, the first thing that comes to my mind, my own experience with one thing that I did that was self-sabotaging. I had no idea I was doing it. A good friend of mine at the time, many years ago, she came to me one day and she said, I want to talk to you. I've noticed that you have this pattern of often canceling out on our planned get-togethers. And I want you to know how that makes me feel. And, is there any way that we can change that? And I looked at her and, it didn't feel good for me, really, to hear it. But on the other hand, I was so grateful because I literally had no idea that I was doing that as a pattern. Mm-hmm. I literally had no idea. And at the time, I could make all sorts of excuses. I could have been defensive and I could have said, well, my life is so busy and I feel overwhelmed. I was just starting out in my practice. And oh my God, it was just like crazy, crazy times in my life. But I looked at her and I thought, thank you. That's a gift you've just given me. No excuses. Mm-hmm. I'm very glad that you've said that. I apologized from my heart. And I just ensured that I would never do that again. If I had to cancel out on her, I would have a damn good reason for doing it. And I would never do that in any of my other relationships. So it was like profound. And I think a lot of the time people self-sabotage in ways like that, and they're not even unaware that they're doing it unless somebody speaks up. And that's another problem we have in our society. You know, we kind of just tolerate, we people please.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, this person has, ghosted me the last 3 times I tried to connect with them, but that's okay. They're going through a stressful time. And I would say, no, you know what? If it bothers you and you're in relationship with that person, then in the kindest possible way, I think you should bring it up with people and face them with what they're doing. And that way they're going to be able to have at least an opportunity to recognize what they're doing and change it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, how do you bring it up to someone who will get instantly offended, will go into denial and doesn't like to be criticized? How do you bring up something like this?
Well, if you already know that you're dealing with somebody like that, then you have to ask yourself, okay, well, what would be my purpose in bringing it up? Because you know how they're going to react. They're just going to, bat it away with, all their ammunition. And you can say to yourself, well, maybe there's a purpose in my just speaking up for myself, standing up for myself.
Yeah.
Maybe I have a pattern of never standing up for myself, never expressing how I feel, letting people run all roughshod all over me. And maybe it gives me a sense of taking care of myself, that I simply speak my truth, but I don't get attached to how the other person reacts to it.
Yeah. No, because that's important.
Yeah, it is. It's very important. So you can, because that's also a form of self-sabotage when you let people ride roughshod all over you and you don't say it.
That is true.
People pleasing is a big self-sabotaging pattern. Really, it is.
That's really interesting because I never thought of it that way, but you're right.
Yeah. People learn that they can take advantage of you. That you'll tolerate anything that they'll dish out. You're left unhappy. Maybe you're simmering with resentment. Maybe you blurt something out that you are very regretful for afterwards.
Yeah.
Speaking up sometimes can be an act of pulling yourself out of self-sabotage. So with a person like the one that you've described, who's just going to deny it and maybe verbally abuse you, maybe get very defensive and blah, blah, blah. You can just stand there and say, okay, that's your opinion on the matter. I just wanted to say my truth and we can agree to disagree. And then you can decide, do I really want this person in my life?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's talk about addictions for a second, like drug addictions, alcohol addictions, one of the biggest forms of self-sabotage. And again, people really believe that it only affects them.
Right.
But, those kind of addictions really affect the people around you. I mean, you think about children, what kind of example they see, what they're growing up with. There can be abuse leading from the addictions. There can be money problems. I mean, there are so many things that these kinds of addictions can bring, other than illness eventually, right? So how do you get someone to recognize what they're doing to the family around them?
Ooh, that can be hard depending on the stage of the addiction, depending on so many other factors. This is rough on many levels, because if the person who is having trouble with the addicted party doesn't have a healthy self-esteem, and they are terribly afraid that if they speak up to their addicted loved one, that they're going to lose the love of that person, or maybe that person will get so upset they'll commit suicide, or they'll do any one of a number of really horrible self-destructive things, then you don't have a chance with that. There's no way that you're going to be able to intervene with somebody who's addicted. However, if you are firm in your awareness that this is not to be tolerated, this will only lead to more destruction, and you have every right to lead your life without the incredible dramas of the addicted person. If you're very centered in that, and very few people are, if you're very centered in that, no nonsense, very matter of fact, then you just say your piece and you leave it at that and you see what the person does with it. Okay. And you be prepared to walk if they're not going to see it your way, if they excuse themselves, if they defend themselves, if they dismiss you, if they verbally abuse you, whatever, you've got your answer. You know that that person is just not ready. And then it's up to you to decide what you're going to do with your life. The unfortunate thing that I see a lot of the time is, you know, the loved ones of the person who's addicted are too scared to do much of anything. And then they enable, as they say, you enable the addicted person to just go on with their self-sabotaging, destructive behavior way too long. Until there's a breaking point, right? And again, things may be said, things may be done that you can't take back, and it causes massive destruction.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and the other thing that also does help is that whole idea of interventions where, you know, a group of people around the addicted person get together and they're very firm. They're all very firm that, you know, they want to support the person in coming out of the addiction. They will not tolerate or enable the person to stay in the addiction.
Can you do that with food addiction, for example?
Yeah, you can do that for so many different kinds of addictions or self-destructive behaviors.
Yeah. Do you find, Lucille, that this self-sabotage, that it kind of carries on through generations? That, you know, you would see your mother doing something as an example, and then you kind of carry on that toxic pattern, and then you pass it on to your children as well. So there has to be a point where you kind of break this pattern.
Yeah. So I really have a lot of heartfelt admiration for the clients who come to me who are ready to break that generational pattern. Because, you know, they are doing the heavy lifting that so many other people in their family were not willing to do. And they're facing, in many ways, the likelihood that their family will reject them, being superior. You think you're better than we are, you know, that you're breaking free of our victim mentality. Or I have to hand it to the clients that come to me. They are so inspiring and so brave. They may be the only person in their family and they have no other support. They may be the only person who wants to break free of the generational self-sabotage.
And do they usually succeed?
You know, a surprising number of them do, especially if they have been at the receiving end of a lot of abuse, of a lot of criticism or control, and they just can't handle it any longer. Some of them have been scapegoated, like, you know, they're the goody two-shoes in the family, and everybody in the family wants to crap on them, you know. Our censors don't get us for that, but and they have nowhere to go other than out. They just have nowhere to go. I mean, I have had you know, a number of clients, they cannot in any way reconcile with their families once they've decided they want to get out of that pattern. They can't reconcile, they can't live in that state, so they make another courageous move, which is to cut their families off. And there are more and more people, unfortunately, who are in that state, and they've some of them form their own communities, like online. You know, they're the family members in exile because they cannot live in the destructiveness of their families, and they can no longer take the abuse and the control and the chaos. They just can't.
How sad is that? That is very sad.
It is very sad. It is true.
What do you think causes people to go into this self-sabotage mode? Like, what makes us self-destruct?
Do you know, a lot of the time it does go back to early trauma or abuse. And a lot of the time people don't make the connection. They often don't even recognize their trauma or abuse because it's been normalized in their families. So they grow up thinking like, oh, well, this is just the way it is. And I will get people coming in and telling me these stories about, oh, you know, we were, you know, fairly happy and close, loving family. And then you dig into the details of the history and you go, oh my God. So your father came home every Saturday night drunk and he would beat up your mother in front of all of you kids? Are you kidding me? I wouldn't say it that way, of
Now I
course.
understand.
But but people will often, because that was normalized in the family,
Yeah.
they lose their inner wisdom and their own common sense. Even as children can pick up that there's something wrong here. But if the whole family keeps their mouths shut about it and treats it like, oh, it's a normal thing, happens every week, they're wrong and everybody else is right. So they bury their own trauma. Well, there's something wrong with me if I feel badly about this. So they bury their trauma. And then many, many years later, they end up self-sabotaging. They're the ones who are drinking. They're the ones who are getting uncontrollably outraged, angry, violent, whatever. And they, once they can make the connection between their sabotaging behavior as an adult and what happened to them as children, and they start healing from the early trauma, then the self-sabotaging behavior, absolutely, they can release from it. There's no question about that. And it also does help if they have a very supportive healing community around them, like Alcoholics Anonymous or Nar-Anon, or, children of adult alcoholics, all that sort of stuff. Very, very helpful. But yes, absolutely, people can break free of that once they connect.
They realize what the cause is. Could it also be a lack of self-confidence or self-worth? Like you just don't, like, when you're like eating yourself to death or drinking yourself, whatever, like because you're just not deserving of having a healthy life or a healthy body.
Yes. And if it is to the point where it is life-threatening, or at least it's affecting your health, when it gets to that level of severity, like, I know sometimes when we're under stress, we eat that piece of chocolate at midnight that's sitting in our fridge screaming our names, right? When we're under stress, we can overeat or whatever, or we stop eating or what have you. And every once in a while when that happens, that's not significant. It's not a significant part of self-sabotage. But if it happens repeatedly and it's actively impacting your health and or really even your survival, like anorexia, then you can pretty well bet there is an abuse pattern or a trauma pattern early in life. Pretty well bet. If your current behavior is linked to threatening your own survival, then it's got to be the trauma. And of course, you're going to have no self-esteem. That just goes along with the package. Of course, you don't feel you deserve. You feel you actually deserve to be punished. You deserve to die. Some people have these thoughts.
And then you look for toxic relationships as well.
And you look for toxic relationships that simply mirror all those negative beliefs about yourself, mirror them back to you. With self-sabotage, a lot of it, the problem with a lot of it is the lack of awareness of where it all started, quote unquote, normalizing of the behavior, so that people feel, oh, okay, it's just me. There's nothing, I'm in denial. If I just work harder, I can do better. People develop all sorts of weird stories. And so you don't want to normalize it, and you want to be really aware of where the original behavior started.
Yeah. So you really need to get to the root of the cause to find out where it all began. So it's pretty much therapy to find out and to get
Yes, a lot.
I guess it depends on the severity of the self-sabotage. I mean, if it's not so bad, or it's not affecting your life in such a negative way, and you realize the patterns and you're ready to make changes, then you can do it on your own, I would assume. But if it's something more deeper,
it's a little bit hard to do completely on your own. But if you belong to a self-help group, is very, very helpful with that, because there's so much into people, doing the 12-step program. That's very helpful. So there are many things that you can do without necessarily going to therapy, for sure. But you need some kind of structure support to help you continue looking and reflecting on your life and looking up what didn't go right for you.
Do you find that most people never get there? They never get to that point? Like, because I mean,
Yeah.
I think it takes a lot to actually acknowledge it to yourself and to
Absolutely.
recognize these toxic patterns and what you're doing to your family around you or your children, or you're neglecting your children, the example you're setting, what you're wasting your money on and everything else. Because I mean, even like chronic shopping can be self-sabotage,
Yes.
right? Something like that.
Yes, and that can wreak a lot of havoc in a family. It destroys the financial structure of the family. There's a lot of deception and secrecy that goes on, and it destroys the trust in the relationships with the other family members or with spouses. Any kind of compulsive, repetitive behavior that is either threatening your day-to-day functioning or impacting negatively on other people, that has got to be dealt with, and you need to see it as something that requires some kind of intervention. You cannot just blow it off as, oh, well, I'm stressed out. This is what happens when I'm stressed out. You can't do that.
Can it also be things like positive things like excessive exercising, where exercise is good and it's healthy for you, but taking it to an extent, to an extreme? Or
you would know this too, because if you're exercising to an extreme, you are putting a huge amount of stress on your body.
Exactly. You need the recovery is as important as the workout.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that, the excessive exercising can come from a belief system that also can stem from trauma. The belief system being, I can never be good enough. I have to constantly be proving that I'm perfect. I can't just do 1 hour of a workout at the gym. It has to be 3 hours. I have to really push myself hard. And the person never, ever really feels good about their workouts or their body. And they are obsessed about continually going back to the gym. It doesn't really give them a lot of reward. They don't get dopamine hits necessarily, but it feels like, oh, well, at least I did my 3 hours. So I have, my demons are a little bit at a distance. I did well enough. I did 3 hours, and then they have this compulsion to keep going back and going back. And I have seen people, I don't know what you've seen, Lynn, I'm sure you've seen it even worse. People who drive their bodies to a point where they look like they're 10 to 20 years older than they really are. Like they have no excess, fat on their bodies.
Just muscle.
Yeah. It's just, that's also, so they don't, if you're doing something excessive that's supposed to be good for you, even excessive can be destructive, no matter if it's good for you or not.
Once you're losing all the fat in your face and everything, I definitely have seen people like that, and it makes you look, you have the opposite effect of what you're trying to achieve.
Exactly.
And the same for diet, people go into extremes with diets and then getting stricter and stricter. As you know, I've talked about this before. I was part of the organizers for the first ever carnivore retreat here in Spain 5 years ago now, before the pandemic. There was a lady there. She was eating only raw food, but to the extreme that she could only eat raw meat, but only raw lamb brain, pretty much. Like she had to reduce her food so much because she became so intolerant to everything. So the more you restrict your diet, the more you don't have enzymes to break anything down. So she couldn't eat even a piece of cooked meat because it would make her sick instantly. And she couldn't eat any other kind of meat. I think she ate some seafood and lamb brain. And that was pretty much it. So I think when you take anything to the extreme, and then she probably thought, I'm doing the best, I'm having the healthiest food in the world, I'm just having raw lamb brain and it's fantastic. But meanwhile, when you take something to that extreme and you can't live a normal life anymore, and everything revolves around your healthy diet and your healthy exercise pattern, and then you are just self-destructing still when you're trying to be on a healthy path. So it's a very fine line where you have to balance between what's actually still good for you and where you've gone too far.
Too far. Absolutely.
So what is the solution? So if we
Uh,
recognize this pattern, okay, we know I'm definitely self-sabotaging in this area of my life. How can I stop? What can we do? How can we address this?
Really ask for help. It may not be therapy, but if it's extreme, you probably will have to end up going to therapy. When it gets to a certain level of extreme, you go to therapy. And you just keep looking for answers, because the thing that will help one alcoholic will not necessarily help every single alcoholic.
Yeah.
So you are then, you kind of have to go on a mission to find what will work for you. It is important that you really understand that working on yourself will flush a lot of whatever you might call them, demons, whatever, to the surface.
Yeah.
You don't know how much stuff has, how much poisonous, negative thinking, how much trauma from your past that you hadn't recognized was trauma, how many disappointments, how many losses, how much of that will be flushed up to the surface as you start doing work on a piece of self-sabotaging behavior.
Yeah.
So I always advise people, this is a marathon. It is not a sprint.
Yeah.
And whatever works for you, but do not put yourself under any pressure or illusion that this is going to, now that you're ready to heal, suddenly the healing's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going to happen for sure, but it's almost always a journey. So we have to be kind of humble and realize we just don't know how it's going to go. But if we are intent, if we truly want a better life, if the pain is way too hard to keep tolerating, then you will remain on your path and you will get wherever you need to go. But don't be afraid to keep asking for help, okay? What a lot of people do when they start out is they recognize they have this, whatever it is, alcoholism or blah, blah, and they say, and they're so ashamed, and they don't want to talk to anybody about it. They think they're the worst person in the entire universe. They think they're going to die if anybody knows their shameful secret. So they try to deal with it on their own. I can tell you, almost never works.
Yeah.
Almost never works. So you really have to be very humble. You have to set aside your shame and always ask for help. Even if the first asking is of the universe, my dear angels, dear loving forces of the universe, please help me to overcome this. And then you accept and you receive whatever help starts coming your way at that point.
And then you have to be careful not to trade one addiction or self-sabotage for another one, because you have to break the pattern permanently.
If you've ever been to an AA meeting,
Never.
How much coffee drinking and smoking goes on? It's incredible.
And the donuts, right? There's donuts. I saw it.
Oh my Lord. Do you know, this is an interesting factoid, but Bill, who was the founder, one of the founders of AA originally, many, many years ago, close to the end of his life, he went to the board of directors of AA and he said to them that he wanted them to pass a motion that they would start introducing nutritional education to all their AA members, because he realized on his journey that you do so much better in your AA journey if you treat your body well, if you provide it with all the nutrients it really does need.
Yeah.
And you know what? The board refused.
Really?
So, yeah, and to this day, there isn't.
Why though?
Yeah.
Like Dr. Diane in a previous episode 44, what she was saying, that you need to have the protein and the amino acids and the right nourishment for your brain in order for your brain to function properly. So I mean, when it comes to AA, that should be crucial.
It should be crucial. I don't know all the details of the story. I only read the story as part of the bio. I think it was the bio of Bill. But as part of that, what they have found, here's another factoid, the amino acid glycine can be very helpful for addictions, especially, substance addictions like alcohol, because
Yeah.
it actually, it's something that alcoholics, for example, are deficient in. And once you supply it, the cravings for alcohol start going away. And one way to get glycine, as you know, Lynn, is through things like bone broth.
Yeah.
It's a really good
Absolutely. The ultimate superfood. Absolutely. And also
Absolutely.
now there's a lot of controversy around Ozempic and these GLP-1 activators.
Yeah.
But they're saying that it actually helps to rewire your brain, and a lot of people are getting rid of addictions. So while there's, different schools of thought when it comes to that, if they're helpful or harmful, but a lot of people are overcoming not just food addiction, but drug addiction, alcohol addiction, all kinds of different issues. So that's an interesting, but that's a topic for another day.
Yeah. There are also class action lawsuits starting up around Ozempic.
Oh yeah? No, interesting. Interesting. But I wonder why. I wonder if there are benefits and that's why, or I don't know what's happening. I'm still open. I don't know if you follow Dr. Tina with a Y. She has some really interesting podcasts about Ozempic and a totally different, but she talks about microdosing it, which is
right. Which is not, I'm sure, is not happening in the real world much. Yeah.
So it's an interesting topic, but a topic for another day. So guys, we're going to wrap this episode up about self-sabotage, about it being selfish. And while it is selfish, we do understand that sometimes it's beyond your control and it's brought on by, trauma or generational trauma even, or the examples that you grew up with. But the good thing is that there's always a solution. And once you recognize the problem and you're open to getting help and reaching out, then, you don't have to destroy the lives of the people around you. Start by making your life better and changing your life for the better. And then, everyone else's life will also improve around you, which is so important.
Yeah.
Right.
So thank you, everyone. And don't forget to like, comment, share, subscribe to our podcast. And, if there's anything that you would like us to discuss on any future episode, please leave it in the comments or send us DMs on our social media platforms.
Absolutely, guys. We look forward to hearing from you and we love getting your questions. So please keep them coming. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye. Please be aware that Lynn and I are here to provide insights, advice, stories that are for educational and entertainment purposes only. None of our content should be considered to be personal, medical, or mental health therapy. If you are experiencing a mental health or physical health challenge, please consult the appropriate healthcare specialist. We are here to provide the best possible content in an atmosphere of positive conversation and personal growth.